We'll have some stage lights, please. That'd be great. All right, so thank you to the Tech District for supporting that. $60,000 of non-dilutive capital was given out that day to these startups. It was fantastic. It was a great competition. And frankly, the other ones, if I had another fund, I would be funding them because there was some real brilliance in there. How was your lunch? You all right? Wow, your enthusiasm is incredible. Did I point out that the coffee's in the back? Okay, you might need some. Anyway, enough of the sarcasm, Don. We are going to start with our next panel. That video sets it up beautifully, and it's about ag tech. Speaking of ag tech, I'd like to now welcome to the stage the panelists for the presenters of our next discussion. It's called Seeds of Innovation, Food Security, and Ag Tech for All. And the sponsor is the BC Centre for Agriculture Innovation at SFU. Representing them to introduce your moderator is Seychelle Cushing. She's the Executive Director of the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Information and Innovation. So please, big hand. Thank you very much, Seychelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for that lovely introduction, and thank you, everyone, for welcoming us here today. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territories of the Stalos peoples on who we're privileged to gather here today. On behalf of the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation, we're thrilled to be a sponsor of this panel. And as many of us know, and as many of us have been hearing today, the Fraser Valley is home to some of the fastest growing agriculture in BC. And it's really where BC's cutting edge agri-technologies are starting to take root. And the stakes are high as we advance agriculture and agri-tech together to make sustainable food production and food security not only for BC but also beyond. And that's where the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation comes in. And through BC CAI, what we call the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation, our co-creation model is here to help producers and companies be able to develop new tools and adopt technologies that are bringing together an ecosystem of expertise to help these companies scale, many of which are actually here in the Fraser Valley. We're here to help companies like Bevel Farms be able to improve their crop performance in their greenhouse, or companies like ONT to develop a more organic, sustainable fertilizer for their strawberry crops, to also supporting upskilling opportunities in partnership with UFE to help deliver vertical farming training. The BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation is here to help advance an ecosystem of partner strengths to give these companies and give our producers an edge for impact in this sector. And all of which we would also like to say has been generously supported by Pacific Hand and the province of British Columbia. So together, and today as we've heard, we have an opportunity to propel BC's agri-tech sector and secure its place as a competitive, resilient, and thriving sector. And we look forward to doing that work with all of you and in partnership with all of you. So on behalf of the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation, we're really excited to be the sponsor here today, and I'm pleased to hand it over to William Johnson, who will be the moderator of today's panel.
Do the handhelds work? They do work. Well, thanks so much, Seychelle, for having me here. You know, I came in from Vancouver today, and I got my first taste of Abbotsford agriculture in the form of barley, water, hops, yeast. Popped on by Fieldhouse Brewing Co. First time there. Any Fieldhouse fans in the audience here? Woo! All right. That's what I figured. I think I could get away with that. So I was 15 minutes late, but I heard that the Premier saved me by running over his time. So thank you, Premier David Eby. Let's get started. Seeds of Innovation, Food Security and Ag Tech for all British Columbia. We have an incredible panel lined up for today. I'm going to call up our panelists. Let's hold the applause till they're all on stage. Dr. Lenore Newman, Director of Food and Agriculture Institute, University of Fraser Valley. Stan Vander, CEO, Rainbow Greenhouses and past chair, BC Agricultural Council. Dr. Rahul Singh, Director of Innovation, BC Centre for Agritech Innovation, BC CAI. And then somebody who's no stranger to everyone here, Gavin, Chief Strategy Officer at Abbotsford Tech District. Please give our panelists a round of applause. Good to see you all again. As we get started with this panel, I want to make sure that the audience here knows, what the perspective that each one of you brings to the panel today. What's your background? What's the lens through which you're going to have this conversation with us today about agritech in the Fraser Valley and really in Canada as well? So, Gavin, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Will. So first up, I do just want to say what you experienced earlier was called value-added agriculture. That's what we call beer. So I had the opportunity to give a bit of a speech earlier, so I'm going to cheat a little. I'm going to start with a quote that I think ought to inspire everyone. This is from 1896. Burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic. But destroy our farms, and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in the country. I see Mike DeYoung nodding. Folks, the entire province depends on agriculture. The entire country depends on agriculture. As I'm fond of telling people in downtown Vancouver boardrooms when I'm there, if you like to eat food, agriculture matters to you. So I'm very fortunate to be part of this conversation because I've come from a background of not being from Abbotsford. I've spent a good chunk of my life for the last 5 years here pretty much all the time working on a project called Abbotsford Tech District. Abbotsford Tech District is a private sector-led investment in supporting innovation. I often describe our project as being 2 layers. There's a development layer and an ecosystem layer. We're building or attempting to build a 140-acre agricultural innovation cluster, and as part of that, we're supporting a lot of innovation and ecosystem initiatives, including working very closely with the University of the Fraser Valley, supporting a national agritech initiative that's emerging out of that work, and a whole bunch of other things like the video that you just saw. I've probably said too much, and now I'll turn over to Rahul.
Thanks, Gavin. I don't have any quote here, but Seychelles introduced the organization I represent here, BC Center for AgTech Innovation. So my name is Rahul Singh. I'm the director of the center. We have a team of amazing 17 people who actually is supporting this ecosystem in agriculture and food systems to support many ways that can be used for developing and adopting agriculture-based technologies. And I'm really excited to be part of this panel primarily because we are going to talk about a lot of fascinating, cool things that are happening in this particular area, and how these things can really support this ecosystem and live up to the standard which you call, the agriculture capital of Canada here in Abbotsford. So really exciting for that.
Well, my name is Stan Vander, and I'm the farmer at the panel, I guess, today. And I'm a flower grower, actually, in Chilliwack. I've been in flowers for close to 39 years now. Succession is in place now in our business. And also, I've also had the privilege of chairing at the Flower Growers and also at the BC Agriculture Council for quite a few years. And therefore, my passion is pretty much all angles of agriculture. I've actually, believe it or not, I was a pig farmer in my early days of farming. I've actually been a dairy farmer at times. I've been a crop farmer, still am a crop farmer today, and still in the flowers. So pretty broad spectrum. I think I like to say I speak for farmers. I like to challenge the farmers. And the excitement about something like a panel like today is really the opportunity to talk about what agriculture looks like 50 years from now. And what do we need to do to get to where we need to be for the future? I think agriculture has changed a lot. If we go back 50 years ago and just say, what was it? We had a lot of co-ops. Farmers were generally fairly small. Today, we've got some fairly sizable farming operations today. They're real businesses, and that's what agriculture is today. It's a business, and I think we are the key and the solution for long-term stability in both food security, but also economically for the province and also for the Fraser Valley.
And I'm Lenore Newman, and I'm director of the Food and Agriculture Institute at UFV, but I'm also a writer, a mentor, and an entrepreneur, but also an optimist. And I could go negative, and this morning, in the very early morning before the coffee clicked in, we kind of went there. And some days when I'm driving to work on 2/3 of a freeway to come to a university where by legislation we have one hand tied behind our back, to argue about policy, and I am going to disagree with the Premier a little bit. I think it's like that 2/3 of a freeway. That's our ag policy, too. And, then I wave goodbye at another company that's moving to Alberta because they're, giving them a free house and a big pile of money. But I'm still an optimist because ag tech is enjoying a moment. And the West Coast is booming for ag tech. From California right on up, we are building ecosystems. We have exciting new businesses coming. So I think we can do amazing things. And as Gavin alluded to, and we'll probably talk a bit about it in the panel, I have struck an MOU with Guelph to build a national ag tech network that will be based here in the Fraser Valley as a hub and in Guelph as a hub. And so that's been occupying a lot of my time, and great support from Gavin on that as well. And also we're roping BC Chi in on this as well. So I'm really optimistic, although maybe, I don't know if I'll live long enough to see that road finish, but we can hope.
Well, no, we hope you do. So I'll be extra optimistic for you. As you can see, we've got a diverse group of panelists here, but hopefully, despite all that diversity, we can sort of come to a shared understanding of what are we talking about when we say ag tech, right? What does that really mean? And I don't know, Rahul, do you want to kick us off on your insights on that?
Sure. And also, just like my background is in biotech, so I'm a biotech professional. And from there, if I talk about ag tech, for me, this is ag biotech, for example, breeding, precision genomics, to develop cultivars that can be resistant to drought, for example, or many other challenges that climate change is bringing to agriculture sectors. But take a step back, agri-tech is a pretty broad space. You can think about it right from even early 1900 when tractors came in, gas-powered tractors. Anything that can make the process or improve the efficiency, productivity in the process, can be defined as agri-tech. But today, we talk more about precision farming, for example, or smart farming. And that's where you start talking about Internet of Things, cloud computing or machine learning and artificial intelligence, for example. But again, these technologies, if you think about actually, machine learning was started something around 1960s or 70s. People were talking about smart farming from 80s, actually, and then GPS, for example, remote sensing came, and NASA and John Deere developed this, automated self-driving tractor in early 2000s. So, it's not really new, but things are just coming together in today, in such a way that it looks like we are talking about something that is really nobody thought about in the past. So for us, agri-tech is pretty broad. It includes robotics, automation. It includes agri-biotech. But more importantly for us, it also includes a lot of regenerative practices that we follow in agriculture, because we are reverting to several practices that we think are more sustainable, just keeping the climate change in mind to maybe better manage our resources. But these are the traditional techniques that can be actually well integrated with the new technologies, especially on data-focused technologies, to serve us better. So that's how I feel like agri-tech is a pretty broad space.
So you said a line there, serve us better. And former innovation commissioner for the province of BC, Dr. Alan Winter, would say, tech is one thing. He'd say innovation is when tech adds social and economic value. So maybe that's what we're talking about here. Stan, how would you interpret, the term ag tech?
Yeah, so I think also, I was thinking about this a little bit because we had a conversation about this, just say, what is ag tech, right? And it sounds like a big word, and I'm really, really happy with Rahul, how you explain that, and I think it's awesome. I thought about some of the biggest game changers for agriculture coming forward, and we were at a presentation here not too long ago, a few months back, and we had an AI conversation. Artificial intelligence, and I think that in my mind is one of the biggest game changers for agriculture, for sure, for the future. The data and the predictability around crop management, around forecasting crops, how we interpret different conditions happening within crops, inside of our barns, how that translates into those data points become are measurable, but secondly, you can interpret things through the data you have. And I think that's one of the biggest single things. You're absolutely right, the technology in terms of the real tech stuff, the type of equipment we use, that's always the fun stuff because it's very visible and that kind of thing. So that's what the farmer's mostly connected with. One thing I like to always say is, don't think the farmer is, I'm going to use the nicer word, don't think the farmer's backwards. They're actually very progressive in terms of what they're looking at. You can't stay in farming today without being progressive in terms of your adoption of technology and that. So anyway, the future, AI, big one coming up.
And I think what you're also saying is that farmers are innovative by nature. That's how I like to think of it. So we've got ag tech and our definition of ag tech sort of established. We talk about the Fraser Valley as, the agricultural capital of Canada. What does that mean, and what are we shooting towards? Are there other ecosystems in the world or in Canada that we can draw parallels between? Who could we look to say, like, that's the vision where we think we want to go? Or can we look at, the Fraser Valley as sort of the foundation for other things that we can do here in Canada? Lenore, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And when we look at real leaders, like if we look at Silicon Valley, which people don't often think of as an ag tech leader, but it really is. It's in fact one of the world's leading regions. And we look at the Netherlands, of course, a little nod to your industry, Stan. And even an emergent power like Singapore, where you're like, well, they don't have land. How are they doing this? There's a secret sauce. And what it is tight collaboration between government, industry, academy, and community all working together. And it functions best when you have a strong ag industry and a strong tech industry at the same time, which is why I am so bullish on the entire Fraser Valley ecosystem for ag tech. Because before Silicon Valley was a tech powerhouse, it was a garlic powerhouse. It's still a garlic powerhouse. You go down there, there's some great garlics, also some good artichokes. Yeah, no, I know, people roll their eyes. They're like, how do you go to like San Francisco and you still find farms? Well, they're there. And we can do that here because we have the same thing, but we need that, what they call that quadruple helix, that model where those four groups are working together. And I think that's what we've really been trying to build, that industry, community, academy kind of nexus, and we're trying to work government into.
Gavin, paint the picture. Take this a bit further, right? And then I want to hear from Stan. Do you want to hear from government? Do you want government in your life? And that's going to be tied to this conversation, right? But we'll start with Gavin.
Thanks so much, Will. So I think what Lenore has described really is the theory of what we should be trying to achieve. I would start with a few base facts. Firstly, Abbotsford is the most productive agricultural jurisdiction in Canada. Secondly, the Fraser Valley produces half the food in British Columbia. It is not a question of whether we should aspire. It is not a question of whether it is possible. It's a question of whether we can afford not to, if we want to actually ensure that our people are fed, both here and throughout the province. We don't have a choice. We have a burning platform. We have a reality that we need to produce more food in this province, and for this region, we have a tremendous opportunity to do that. I want to take a step back to that question that Will didn't let me answer, but the definition of agritech. Folks, what is agritech? Irrigation, the plow, fertilizer, that's agritech. Agritech is not abstract. Agritech is not something that is out there for other people to do. Abbotsford, agritech is something that everybody is doing if they are a farmer or producer. What we can do here is be a powerhouse in enabling incremental farmers and producers to implement innovation. We can do a better job of developing and exporting innovation rather than just importing and integrating innovation. And if we do that, we will be absolutely set up for success. And if we don't, we'll be, we will be missing out on a tremendous opportunity as a region that should be central to our entire economic conversation.
Everything you're talking about, what Lenore talked about, that doesn't happen automatically, right? So how do we create the conditions for the type of collaborations that you were talking about, right? The 4 different stakeholder groups. And before we can do any of this, don't we need the farmers' buy-in, right? So again, Stan, how do you think about that?
So your question before this was, do we want government in? So want and
You really
need.
wanted to answer that.
So I would phrase it this way. I would say there's 2 things. There's want and need here. And I think it's more around need. We need government involved in policy development. But Lenore touched on there is collaboration between the farmers, between government, between academia. You could say the policymakers in whole. Absolutely critical that we are together in the room, and we must. I'm going to use the Dutch model that Lenore referred to. Earlier today, we were talking about this. The Dutch lock themselves in a room, and they don't leave till they come up with a solution. They give, they punch, they do whatever it takes, and they make a deal, and it works. And I think that's one of the things that we spend too much time in just talking about it. We got to get some action done on some of these things. And I have to say, I think we're cautiously optimistic about what we hear the Premier say. As farmers, we probably sit around and just think, oh man, what's coming now? Is this gonna affect our sacred ALR? It shouldn't be a sacred ALR. It should be, what's the next ALR look like? So I think, yes, to answer your question, we don't want government in, but we do need them in. They are part of the solution.
Well, and again, back to, conditions for collaboration. What's happening right now? Who's moving the dial here within the Fraser Valley? What's an example of an initiative that's underway?
Maybe I can
jump in
on that,
Rahul.
And maybe coming to government question as well, I would say that Lenore highlighted quadruple model of innovation that Dutch has developed, which involves government, industry, academia, and also society as well. So I would add that, we all of us have some role to play. So we have to be, we need to recognize that as well. It's just not the government. Every member has to play their role in bringing innovation. And primarily, I'm saying that from a scientist perspective, because you're talking about 50 years down the road. If you look at the climate projections for just the valley, what's going to happen in next 50 years, we don't have any option. It's not just about the opportunity. We will be not doing a good service to future generations. So, but coming back to what's going on, I will talk about our center, which is BC Center for AgTech Innovation, and the unique aspect of our center is that although based at Simon Fraser University, but living up to the standards of of the university called as most engaged university in Canada, we actually have the provincial mandate, which makes us able to work across the province, which each of the post-secondary institute in BC and beyond as well actually, and also work with different local governments, indigenous community members as well, to bring local innovations, to identify local challenges, but also bring local solutions as well to that community. And that kind of model, collaborative model, we have great relationship with University of Fraser Valley as well. We're trying to develop, support their leadership because they know what is the need and what the solution they can bring for your community. And that's what we do, when we go to Okanagan, to other island as well. We try to do that, strengthen that local ecosystem.
So collaboration is not an issue. You guys are all up here, right? You want to work together. Let's try and make this a bit spicy. What are the real issues? And I heard that, was it BC was on earlier today, and maybe can raise some issues. But in the context of this conversation, what are some challenges to achieving the vision that we're all talking about? Lenore, you got something?
Oh, yeah. One of the challenges, and I know the provost will be on stage pushing this further, is we are the largest population region in the entire country without a comprehensive university. And that is a real problem. And you might be like, well, then what are we sitting in, Lenore? It looked like a university. Well, yeah, it's without the money. And and I'm being a bit cheeky, but they do pay me to be cheeky, so there you go. Our problem is this. When the University of the Fraser Valley was created, we were created under a separate mandate from the big universities, like our friends at SFU and UBC. And that kind of worked for a while, but what we've run into, it means we can't stage graduate programs. So that means when I'm training really amazing students, they get picked off to Guelph, they never come back. It means our professors don't really have time to do much in the way of extension with industries. So our ag department is asked to do projects, to come in on things, and we do them, but it's on the side of our desk. It means an institute like mine is largely run through private money, and I mean, you know, hey, it's what I do for a living is make this work. But Ontario is the agricultural technology powerhouse in this country because of Guelph. Because there is a government agreement, much like this, this Helix model. There's a government agreement that has said, okay, Guelph is going to be provided with lots of resources, lots of seats, and I know James will talk more about this. So to me, this is a massive barrier, and it's a little frustrating because I really believe that our valley deserves the same as Surrey or Vancouver or Victoria.
UFV should be the Guelph of the West. Where are the policymakers? Somebody put that in their platform.
Thank you, Gavin.
But let's talk about challenges. I think one of the greatest challenges that we have to the ability to advance agritech and ag innovation and food innovation in the valley is that we have this nervousness about the market. We have this nervousness about the private sector. Hey, there's all these people that want to invest money in food innovation. There's all these people that want to invest money in Abbotsford, like we do, billions. What are they up to? Why would they want to do that? Why would people want to come and invest in agriculture? Why would people want to come invest in Abbotsford? I'll tell you why the private sector invests. To generate a return. The private sector invests because people have a thesis of why it's a good investment. The private sector invests because there are clear, predictable, stable conditions for investment where they know what they have to do in order to be allowed to invest. And having been allowed to invest, they expect to generate a return. This is the reality of where we are. Right now, markets have looked and are looking toward food innovation as being of tremendous, huge potential and of existential need to all of humankind. People want to invest. So on behalf of the private sector, let us invest. Tell us what we have to do to be allowed to invest. We have a stone soup university. To quote Lenore, hold for applause. Lenore has joked that UFV is a stone soup university. It needs more government funding. It needs to be put at a higher level. But we also need to make sure the private sector can invest. And I'll be totally frank, we are the largest donor in recent years to the University of the Fraser Valley, and given the opportunity, we will become even larger. But we can only do that if we know under what circumstances we're allowed to invest in the Fraser Valley. So to government folks in the room, let us invest.
So just to be clear here, Lenore, you're saying you need more government funding. Gavin, you're saying the private sector is ready to step up with funding or financing, but it's unclear how to facilitate that exchange of value, or just so we're really clear here.
Don's telling me we need decisions made by government. Right? At the end of the day, government dollars are needed. Government has an important role to play in investing in our public post-secondary institutions, but those post-secondary institutions are at their best when they're working, especially in an area like agriculture, when they're working with the private sector to bring innovation through commercialization and to markets in a way that creates jobs and opportunities and feeds people. But in order for the private sector to be able to invest, we need all levels of government, federal, provincial, municipal right now is our holdup, guys, to tell us under what circumstances are we allowed to invest.
And to be explicit, UFV needs to be put on the same legislative footing as universities like UVic and SFU. I promise you we'll play nice and we'll bring snacks. But it's, we want in. The Valley wants in.
I think on the note of what's moving the needle, what's not moving the needle, I agree with some of the comments that have been made that we need the government to make decisions so we can move forward. And as a farmer, I think we feel the same thing. There are definitely, and I think of things like water. You know, we've obviously been dealing with water shortages now the past year or two. There's concerns about that, but we also have times of the year where we have excess water. So government is listening, and they are making some changes in policy, but I think for most of us as business people, we're often feeling that it takes so long to get the policy where we need it. We see these challenges on the horizon, and it takes too long to get to a decision. So I would like to see that government expedites more their decision-making process, their policy process, through the collaboration. I think, yes, around here we have great collaboration. That sometimes can take a long time with government. It's a big organization.
And Rahul, I saw that you had the mic up.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment that like access to talent, like, you know, which Lenore is kind of alluding to as well, like, you know, to having something, yeah, like more foundational in Fraser Valley would be helpful in that. But also, like, I think exceeding collaboration with, like, you know, you don't want to create something that already exists as well. So how you can build up on existing resources and add additional, like, you know, expertise to that. So how whatever UBC, SFU has created, like, you know, what additional, like, you know, things can be created at UFE, for example, so that we collectively create larger value for the province in general, right? So I think we need those kind of collaborative approaches.
And if we're looking at, so government investment, you know, creating clarity for the conditions with which private sector can get involved. We talked about talent, we talked about expediting the process for decision making. Where are the other places where we need to put focus? Whether, yeah, it's upskilling, it's, you know, investments in infrastructure. Let's be really specific about where else do we need to focus. Rahul, I think you got something.
Yeah, upskilling is something certainly we are seeing a lot of interest. So we reach out to, like, you know, agri-producers like farmers and also tech companies as well, for example, what their challenges are in advancing their innovation, especially at the scale-up level, because there are a lot of resources available for startup, like, you know, early stage startups to advance to the valley of death. But then beyond that, like, you know, at the scale-up stage, there are limited resources. They sometimes don't have, like, housing, for example, is a challenge for a lot of startups to have people who can live there, like, support themselves, their families as well, and support the startup, which requires a lot of work as well. So that certainly is a challenge, that what opportunities are available for scale-ups, and something, a space that we are trying to fill as well in collaboration with many other partners as well.
Is there anything else you guys want to jump in with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I often think is infrastructure is definitely always a lack. We're always struggling with water supply, electricity, gas, roads. All these things are major infrastructure impediments when it comes down to business opportunity, and they're also killing business productivity in a very high level. And I think that's one of the things when we look at, say, attracting new business, and that business is looking for where can they flourish, where can they expand, grow, you know, produce more and more. I look at ourselves so often and just say, you know, how many hours do my trucks and my people spend on the road just simply parked in traffic? You know, that's an issue. We need to fix that stuff. But we're also hearing producers actually saying there's not enough good quality water to produce food. We're talking a guy that grows cucumbers. And he basically can't get enough water because the infrastructure is not. Have we put a new dam in, anything to support all the new people in the province? These are really critical things when we're talking about more people, which is great for our businesses, but we can't produce the stuff because we don't have enough water. We're going to get water restrictions. We could actually see, in some cases, call it people trump water, and yet without water, we don't exist as people.
And sort of digging deeper there, let's take it back to the land. Maybe Stan, you'll have something to say about this. You know, are there any, you know, regulatory issues or barriers that would really, you know, unlock the potential of the actual land when we're talking about the Fraser Valley and the geographic area? Like, what do you think about when you think about, you know, the land itself?
might need body armor on the way out of the building. I get to kick this one off. So here's the bottom line. I think we all know they're not making more land. So it's pretty critical that we make sure that the land we want to keep for farm-based, land-based agriculture, that we are keeping it. That's important. That does not mean to say that every piece of ag land is sacred. I really believe that. We must inventory our ag land to determine the highest and best use of that ag land. We can classify it into different segments so we know what is highest producing, what is lower producing, what is likely to never produce anything. And there has to be this balance, because we all know that the farmer is not successful without the people who buy the very products they produce. That's an essential. So opportunities around this, I hinted at it before, maybe I didn't even hint at it. I believe the ALR needs a pretty solid review. We do have 50-year-old legislation, which, by the way, was created by the government we currently have. But it's also a political tightrope for governments. How do they tweak something, change it for the better, when you could say, there's a lot of people, and I'll just use a farmer, especially a young farmer trying to start out, buying land at 130,000, I think we peaked out at, maybe even higher in some areas, and they're looking at it, there's no way you can make money on that. Not a chance on an average crop. So you need to find some way into it. However, land's gonna keep going up. It's not gonna go away, and as a farmer who's benefited from land going up, and every farmer owns land, by the way, is benefiting from it, you actually can leverage and build new technology, apply new innovation to your business. So it's a huge win. So I guess, just not to go on too long about it, I think we need to review it, but we need to get the farmers in the room for the policy discussion. We need to roll up our sleeves around this one and talk about what's the future look like for agriculture and how can we accommodate this?
Yeah, and also at the risk of needing that body armor, I gotta tell you a little story on this, because this where my optimism gets a bit thin sometimes on this. And a little while back, about 3 or 4 years back, a company called Goodleaf came and said, we want to locate in Abbotsford. And they produce leafy greens indoors. And they're backed by McCain. They're one of the most successful in the country. They make money. They're nice. They're good. And we thought, oh, this is great. So go well with the task force. And they said, now we'll warn you, there's other jurisdictions that would like us, but we'll give BC first dibs. And, well, it started okay. We said, well, what do you want? And because I was still on the task force at the time, they said, we want access to a port. We're like, check mark. We have a port. And Alberta said, well, we got an inland port. And I said, that's not a port. And anyway, there's a definitional problem there. They said, we want a big pile of government money. Alberta said, we have that. BC said, well, we got to innovate BC. That's a big pile of money. So we're like, check mark.
Just to be clear, it's not that much money.
And well, I know, but it's there. And so we felt, well, boy, we're kind of winning. And they wanted clean electricity. We had that. Alberta had coal power. We're like, oh man, we're getting ahead. They said we want a good university, and well, it's a bit of a wash on that, because we had a lovely university that we're sitting in, and they had lovely universities, and they said we want policy clarity. Now, earlier you heard the premier of this fine province say the ALC always sorts it out, and I didn't laugh at the premier, of course, because that sounded like a bad career move, but I thought about Goodleaf, because we said, well, you can't do the kind of processing and growing you want under the current policy, but the ALC will sort it out. And I was naive at the time and still believed that was probably going to work. And then a period of time happened that I can't politely describe the process that Goodleaf wandered through. 18 months later, no process, no real progress at all. Alberta phones them, says, we want you to fly out and meet the premier, and he will tell you why you should locate in our province. there will be no red tape. Well, last week in the media, Goodleaf announced that they're opening, they're producing lettuce. That was $50 million investment, 100 jobs, 20 million pounds of leafy greens a year. We lost that one because we didn't have policy clarity. And I'm at a point, I almost don't care what the policy is. I mean, I do a little bit, but I just want it to be written down and to be clear so an investor can come in and say, okay, I can do X, I can't do Y, let's go forward. Because this haywire, bit by bit, back of the napkin stuff is losing us business.
As I could definitely affirm Lenore's view around certainty, predictability, understanding what conditions are for investment. I think just to pick up on the original question around land, it's also important to recognize that as we move into more and more agricultural innovation, it doesn't just happen on agricultural land. What we're attempting to do is the reverse of a trend that is pervasive throughout particularly the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley, and that is that jobs land has turned into condos land. The condos ate it. We're attempting to do the reverse. We have advanced a 140-acre official community plan amendment that would take a swath of land that was previously zoned for basically suburban sprawl and turn it into a mixed-use innovation district in order to be allowed, enabled to create jobs, create educational opportunities, create innovation and commercialization that will act in support of food production on lands that are agriculturally zoned. So it's important that we look at the whole gamut of land, and I would again just reaffirm Lenore's point. Clear, predictable, understandable conditions that are written down that you can then tick the boxes against is a fantastic enabler of investment.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. I don't know, if we were on time, we would be ending now, but we started late. So does anyone have any direction on that? Perfect. All right, let's keep going. What else do you want from government? Or put differently, what do you wish government knew that they don't know? Here's another opportunity to. Might need a bigger body, another protective gear though.
So one of the things that I really love about what we've been doing in past years is where we get government on buses and we take them out to agriculture and what's going on. And I think that's one of the biggest wins that I've seen over the years. It takes these people who in most cases have never seen a cow and understand how milk gets there. And it puts them in a place where they now understand. And in most cases, you can relate with them to a point where they now understand. You could see some of the complexities that agriculture deals with. So that's the one thing I want to keep. That's a wish, to continue to provide that. Second wish is we do, as farm organizations, we do a ton of collaboration with the government. Just most recently, I think there was Beef Days in Victoria, and that's where the beef farmers all get down into Victoria, and they meet with the government. It's awareness more than anything else. They serve them some fine food and all this good stuff and that, and they love to do pictures, the government with the farmers. But we need to do more than that. We need to actually move on policy. We need to move forward on things, and I would say support these farm organizations. Sometimes I feel that no offense to academia and all the other business agendas, but I do feel sometimes the government doesn't do enough to support the farm organizations, so those grassroots organizations can effectively talk to government and do this arm wrestling around the table, around the policy. Think of something like the ALR. Major initiative, major impact for the future. The farmers are busy working in the fields, trying to get the job done, and they don't have the time, they don't have the resources in their sectors to throw people at these discussions. I remember the last conversations we had around, we had Zone 1 and 2, and we talked with government. It's like, we don't have the resources in the farm community to do this. It takes money to do these things, and that's where if government would say, we're going to invest something in that, help the farm organizations, the farmer could be at the table to have some conversations, and we can move policy forward because the government could follow it with policy quickly.
Yeah, and just to kind of reaffirm that and take it back a step. Stan, what I love what you're talking about here is that history of the ALR. The ALR was put in place to be a food production region, field to table. It's right in the original mother legislation. And I worry the government right now is, over the last 30 years or so, there's been a bit of a drift, and sometimes it's a bit more of a green belt than it is a food production region. And they need to pick one. They need to decide what it's going to be and stick with it and tell us, and then we can plan accordingly. But I think they should stick with food production region. But that shift to the green belt model is really dangerous. If we look to the UK, which is kind of where our ALR came from, it is largely shifted to a green belt. There is almost no farming there, and now they're having a food crisis because supply. Surprise. I guess the other thing we can say, governments really need to realize that even if our economic number isn't as high as some other industries, if you turn food off, you probably will hear about it.
I'll just add that when we talk about innovation, we often just talk about technology, but if there is innovation around policies as well, like how we can be more innovative or risk-averse, like on the policy side, that might advance, like some of the innovations or things that we want to solve as well. Doing, for example, what some of the things we learned from our technology, like our inventors, is that techno-economic analysis of any invention or technology they want to advance, and like a policy economist and analyst is doing that upfront from them, especially from the government side. Okay, if you advance these technologies, these are the major policy barriers or economic hurdles you may face, and you prepare upfront for that. That might support everyone to move forward, with some solution in mind, and that could be one of the approaches. But yeah, we need to think about innovation in policy aspects as well.
Innovation and policy, I love that. Go ahead, Gavin.
A few things. First, I think that governments on the whole need to understand that the worst thing you can do to business is a slow maybe. Fast no, fast yes, slow maybe. Not helpful. The second, I think, is that government needs to understand, all governments need to understand that the conversation goes on without them. And too often what happens is you end up with rooms like this, you end up with rooms where government is not formally represented. It isn't a government process, but the conversation is happening. The agenda is moving forward. The consensus is being formed, and then governments often struggle to catch up with a new reality that is formed in the market of ideas. So I think it's really, really important that governments are aware of and attuned to all the things that are happening outside of their formal processes. And the final thing that I will say, and admittedly this is definitely cheap red meat, I think that governments at every level need to understand just what tremendous potential there is right here in the Fraser Valley. They need to understand that this is where economic recovery is going to come from. This is where food comes from. This is where there is opportunity to build housing, to create quality of life, to create affordability. This is where it is happening. But the Fraser Valley needs their help. It needs investment, and it is time for the Fraser Valley to get its fair share.
Right. I think that's a really good place for us to almost end this. I'm going to give all of you the final word, though, but we've talked about, gaining that regulatory clarity. We've talked about government funding and infrastructure and talent and upskilling. We've talked about no more slow maybes. We've talked about lots of different things. What's the final word for the audience here? And we'll start with you, Gavin.
I felt like I kind of already gave it. All right, folks, my closing is this, once again. As a region, as representatives of the region, as folks from business, from government, from the community in this room, it is time for you to stand up, to be loud. It is time for you to recognize the power that you hold. Let's talk about the elephant in the room that we've all alluded to. There's a provincial election coming, and like no time before, the Fraser Valley is the battleground. There are two fundamental choices as to the battle that you can set up for this fall. The first is to allow it to descend into a culture war of division, where people look for wedge politics that they can wage against one another. The second is that you, as representatives and leaders in your community, demand and insist that anyone who wants to form a government must have a clear, constructive, proactive agenda for your community and for your region, and that you will hold them to account and judge them on that basis. I would ask that you do that.
Thanks, Gavin. Rahul.
So I would focus on collaboration. We have to keep our eyes on what's going to happen in next 50 years. Why Abbotsford is called like agricultural capital is because of the hard work, dedication from the past generations and what we are going to do for the future generations. Our precipitation is going to be much low in summer times. Fall precipitation will increase. It might, make flooding, for example, frequent as well. We are going to see a lot of like warm days, drought in the coming future. So how we are going to prepare for that? We cannot wait for individual groups to make a decision for us. We have to make that collectively. So we have to have that vision, and I would encourage you all to work together for that vision to solve those challenges.
Thanks, Rahul. Stan.
So to add versus just simply ditto the comments, I think from an agriculture point of view, agriculture is very prepared to continue the supplying the food security for the province and for the country overall. What we need from the government is to continue to engage on the policy that actually continues to move that forward. So to deal with the impediments that are in the way, talk about those things and find ways around them. I think that's a key thing. And I think those conversations, the farm associations work very hard to lobby with the government, to make the government aware of, you could say, the things that are getting in the way of their business. We need government to really listen to those things and don't get involved in, I call it just the politics of the day. Gavin, you touched on it a bit, but to focus on the vision of where we're going. What's the leadership we need to basically make that happen?
I would close with agricultural technology isn't new. It's a 10,000-year race between hunger and human potential. And this region is poised and has always been poised to play a big role in that. And I remain optimistic. The next 10 years be really interesting here. So let's go out and get it done.
Lenore, Stan, Rahul, Gavin, thanks so much for your time and insights. That was a lot of fun.
Nothing like direct honesty. Thank you so very much, all of you. That was fantastic. The only problem is, what I heard is it's up to us. We can't just point fingers out. Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's the this. It's the neighbor. It's the this. It's all of us together. And to restate that quote from the great philosopher Bono, there is no them, there's only us. So thank you for that wonderful discussion. And I think that we can take that into any of the industries that we're involved in here. And let's collaborate, let's work together. During election periods, it gets so divisive. And it doesn't need to be divisive, it just needs to be discussive so that we're actually having conversations. And so attend debates, do the things, whatever you gotta do, but work together. Work together, please. Oh, so who needs sugar? We don't grow sugar here, but we seem to have grown a whole load of sugary stuff outside the door. So we are at 12. Oh yeah, he's moved. I can't ask him anymore.
240. And he's still here. He just switched seats.
Oh, he's still. Oh man, didn't recognize him for the haircut. 240. 240? 242? Whatever it is. 15 minutes from now, we're going to be back in here. And so there is coffee, sweets, bathrooms, and lots of people to have conversations with. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. Let's give it up to the organizers of this great place. Come on, well done. Oh.
When you try your best, but